Remember the fight against ISIS? The Pentagon Tuesday announcing that it would directly arm Syrian Kurds. It's been quickly followed by allied-backed Arab and Kurdish militias taking the Tabqa Dam, a key lever on the road to the Islamic State stronghold of Raqqa. Could victory now be in sight? The Trump administration's announcement serves a double purpose. It bolsters the boots on the ground, and it's a warning to those with differing priorities. Russia, whose foreign minister was at the White House Wednesday, backs the Kurds, but also the Assad government in Damascus. Moscow's been sponsoring peace talks in the Kazakh capital and de-escalation zones that would also include no-fly zones. Now, Sergei Lavrov has left Washington, but next week it'll be Turkey's president who will be in town, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who's fuming over the decision to arm Kurds that he says are in cahoots with the PKK insurgency he's fighting near his southeastern border. What will Erdogan get from his trip to Washington? If it's nothing, well, how will he react? Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at that Kurdish offensive that's drawing nearer to ISIS's stronghold. With us from Ankara, he's a former Turkish military advisor, Metin Atmaca, security analyst and columnist for Al Monitor's Turkey Pulse. Thank you for being with us. From London, Kurdish scholar Shwan Zulal, fellow at King's College, is also with us. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
From Moscow, Alexei Klebnikov of the Russian International Affairs Council.
Hi there.
Hi there. And from Washington, he was a diplomat at the Syrian embassy in the U.S. Capitol when he defected. Bassam Barabandi advises the Syrian opposition's High Negotiations Committee. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
The France 24 debate on Facebook and Twitter, the hashtag F24debate. It's less than 50 kilometers from Raqqa. A mix of Kurdish and Arab militias now clearing the mines around the Tabqa Dam after retaking the complex and the nearby town. Before we go to our panel, let's go to this report by Emerald Maxwell.
A strategic victory against the Islamic State group. The Syrian Democratic Forces have retaken the key city of Tabqa and its nearby dam from the jihadists. But not all NATO allies are celebrating. Turkey says the Syrian Democratic Forces, which are mainly comprised of Kurdish YPG fighters, are an extension of the PKK, a Turkish Kurdish rebel group fighting for autonomy since the 1980s. That's officially considered a terrorist organization. But Turkey has failed to convince its Western allies to regard the YPG in the same way. The US already provides it with air support and has defended its decision to arm the fighters, calling it the only force on the ground that can successfully seize Raqqa in the near future. The YPG is just one group among a myriad political parties and militias that represent the Kurds, spread across northern Syria and Iraq, parts of Iran and Turkey. They make up nearly a quarter of Turkey's population, 9.5% of Syria's, and 22% of Iraq's. Some of the groups ultimately seek to create an independent Kurdistan. Others want Kurdish autonomy within existing national boundaries. Many are at the forefront of the fight against the Islamic State group. In Syria, the YPG has been very effective at driving the jihadists back, despite continuous bombardment by Turkey. Meanwhile, in Iraq, Kurdish fighters come from rival parties, the KDP and the PUK. The PUK has links to the PKK in Turkey, while the KDP's leader is the president of Iraq's autonomous Kurdish region. The US has provided military assistance to them since the Islamic State group's 2014 Iraq assault. But the Americans' increasing support of the Kurds is putting more strain than ever on the US-Turkish alliance. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has urged the United States to reconsider and said he'll be taking it up with Donald Trump at a meeting next week.
All right, let's first turn to Metin Atmaca, who teaches social science at the University of Ankara. Just get that title description straight. Metin, this taking of Tabqa, a good news story?
Well, when we look at it from the U.S. perspective, it's definitely
good point, but when we look at it through Turkish perspective, it is not a good news. It's just an expansion of an organization which is called as a terrorist organization in Turkey. So from which perspective we are looking, that we could be saying that it's a good or not a good point. But on the other hand, when we look at on the ground, probably this is the most effective force that is fighting against the Islamic State. So on both sides, still there is a kind of a point that it's working out for both. It's protecting one way that the frontiers of Turkey and Syria from the IS, but on the other hand, it's also helping the Western powers to beat the Islamic State.
All right, so as you say, the Turkish government puts both ISIS and the Syrian Kurds on the same plane, calling them both terrorist organizations. How do ordinary Turks, though, feel about it?
Well, it's mixed here in Turkey. In the end, we have a Turkish issue which is extending to the last 100 years in Turkey. So partially it is seen as part of the Turkish Kurdish issue here in Turkey, since most of the Kurds in Syria are some way or the other related with the Kurds living in Turkey. So it's still a mixed feelings. On the other hand, in the last 2 years, as a part of the elections that going on in Turkey, the nationalist feelings has been high, especially as a part of the governing party, AK party, for beating its rival parties. So, I mean, there isn't a clear agenda or a clear points of how the Turkish population is seeing at the moment the Kurds both in Turkey as well as the one in Syria.
All right, so Turks are divided. The Turkish president, though, unequivocal. He's furious at the Pentagon's announcement. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who spoke out on Wednesday.
We want to believe that our allies will prefer to side with us, not with a terrorist organization. I will convey our stance on this matter and our concerns regarding this decision to President Trump on May the 16th, in detail.
François, your reaction?
Well, I mean, the issue in Turkey, I mean, Metin sort of mentioned, this is a century-old issue in Turkey and is for a Turkish state-making, really. If you oppress a population, which in Turkey's case, the Kurdish population, of course, you'll end up with resistance, as we've seen in the case of PKK. Somebody's hero, somebody's other person's terrorist. So from a Kurdish point of view, what's happening in Syria, I mean, let's put one thing in perspective. The Kurds in Syria have no interest in being a threat to Turkey. And so far, they've gone out of their way to make sure that they are not presenting any threat to Turkish sovereignty or trying to launch any attacks from Syria, because they understand that if they do, then they'll get into trouble with the Turkish state and the Turkish army and so on. However, Turkey has provoked them, over the last 5-6 years since the Syrian civil war has started, and even a couple of weeks ago there was airstrikes against the YPG headquarters and bases within Syria. And although YPG responded, but in a very sort of measured response, because they don't want to be seen as somebody who threatens a security threat to Turkey. And, President Erdogan has sort of made it clear that he sees the PKK as and YPG part of PKK. Yes, YPG has links with PKK. Nobody can deny that. But YPG and PKK are two different organizations. PKK is fighting for a different cause within Turkey. YPG is more interested in what's happening within Syria. So the two issues are very different. And from an American perspective, to answer your question earlier about whether this is a good news, I mean, it is very good news for the coalition against ISIS and another step to defeat ISIS. And let's not forget, this operation has started almost 2 months ago. So it's a slow, grinding process to try to drive ISIS out and eventually take Raqqa, the capital of ISIS. And even then is not finished. So it's still a lot to come in this fight against ISIS. And the arming of the Kurds in Syria is the only way you can quickly, without using troops, US and European troops on the ground to try to fight ISIS. They're the only effective force who have managed to coordinate and have the discipline to take Raqqa. And in another sense, I mean, taking Raqqa again, the preparation has been in the making since Obama was in office last year. I remember autumn of last year, the preparation has been taken. And this is not, yes, maybe it's Obama's administration's decision, the continuation of their decision, but the Trump's administration have taken a very extensive review of their policy, but the conclusion appears to be the same. Hence, we saw yesterday that the Pentagon is willing to arm the Kurds, giving them more weapons and heavy weapons to be able to progress in Raqqa and hopefully take it in a short period of time.
Let me bring in Alexei Klebnikov on this. Alexei, first of all, it's not just the United States that backs the Syrian Kurds. Moscow does as well. They have a bureau in Moscow. What are the Russians telling the Turks, for instance, when they sit down together at in the framework of those peace talks that are taking place in Astana?
So firstly, the Kurdish issue is one of the most sensitive for Turks, and it's not a real issue for Russia. So I don't think they put much discussion on particular that issue. I think they mostly concentrate on things that they have in common. So recently, when Erdogan was in Sochi and met with Putin, of course, it might demonstrate that Erdogan sort of guaranteed that part of the opposition, which was present in Astana, would not, sabotage the talks, and the Russian proposed a new plan for de-escalation zones in Syria. As for Russia's policy towards Turks, I think there is one clear rationale, is that Kurds is an essential part of the Syrian state. So they inevitably will be a part of the future state, and they will be involved in the political talks. So as Kurds is one of the most capable, military capable forces on the ground fighting ISIS, it deserves, and it will claim more autonomy from the central government in Damascus. So, and that might increase tensions between the government, the future government in Damascus, and Kurds. So I think that Moscow's role here, that it wants to be an interlocutor and mediator between Kurds and the Syrian government, to make sure sort of a smooth negotiation process to secure a fair deal between Kurds, Syrian Kurds, and central government in Damascus in the future.
Alexei, let me ask you about the timeline of events, the way they've unfolded. On Tuesday, the Pentagon makes this announcement. They're going to directly arm the Kurds. They make it just before the arrival of the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. But most importantly, they make it a week before Recep Tayyip Erdogan's expected in Washington. Why do you think Washington picked this moment to make the announcement?
I think it falls in line with the recent U.S. Steps towards Syrian crisis. I mean, for the last 6 months, the U.S. significantly lost its positions in Syria. So Russia, Turkey, Iran started to have an upper hand in the conflict in Syria on the ground. So nowadays, one of the major U.S. tasks is to increase its influence there. So basically, it shouldn't be perceived as a surprise that U.S. Announced so openly declared its support to Kurds. I mean,
yeah, but the timing, why now?
Because it coincides with this de-escalation zones plan, which Donald Trump supports, as well as other actors. Secondly, it falls in line with this sort of a re-engagement between Russia and the United States. So basically, the U.S. sends a signal to Turkey that the U.S. is still in the region, is still in Syria, and it won't let it, unilaterally dictate its policy in north of Syria.
In north of Syria. Bassam Barabandi, do you agree?
Yes, sir. No, I don't agree. Basically, the American position toward the Kurds is well known for the last 2 years. Unfortunately, the previous administration, they create all this momentum, all these plans to empower the Kurds to fight ISIS. They are doing achievement on the ground, there's no doubt about it. But what we as a Syrian, as an Arab who live in that area, the feelings is like this. Number one, our brothers, the Kurds, they hijacked the revolution, same like Nusra hijacked the revolution. The revolution, Syrian revolution, was for democracy, human rights, equal rights for all Syrian, democracy for all Syrian, including the Kurds. Everybody suffered from Assad, but day by day, the Kurds, they take their own agenda and develop it, and now they have their own dream, or they have their own targets. Unfortunately, again, we can say that the administration, Obama administration, unfairly, they support the Kurds. They didn't support any other Arab groups who has been fighting ISIS before the Kurds. Now, the current administration is just inherited that old policy, and it's very difficult to reverse it due to the time, due to the energy, due to all what's complexity in Syria. They are going forward with it. The decision why
they're going forward with it because the Kurdish fighters are the ones who are the most effective. You'll agree.
They are effective, there's no doubt, but that doesn't mean they are the only. What I'm trying to say, the American previous administration, they didn't count on the Syrian, on the Arabs. They didn't give them the same opportunity they gave to the Kurds. Simply they pick up the Kurds and empower them, and now they are saying they are the only. My problem is with the word the only. I have problem with my colleagues from Russia, what he said that Russia will be playing mediator between the Kurds who will gain more lands and the central government. We believe that the Kurds have the rights. Definitely they have the rights, cultural rights, economic rights, their flags, their language. There's no doubt. It's not a question about it. But they don't have the rights to take Arab Sunni lands. That, number one, it will become empowering ISIS agenda, empowering ISIS way of recruiting more Sunnis. They have to know how to live with the neighbors. The neighbors here are their Syrian who host them for a quite long time. How we go forward, this is all from history now, how we go forward. I believe we have a great opportunity today in the fight against ISIS, using SDF as a main power that is de facto now. United States can use its influence on PYD to separate or defect from PKK, to be more reconciled to the Arabs, to be more reconciled to other Kurdish party, National Kurdish Party and other groups, to allow more Peshmerga, Syrian Peshmerga in Iraq to come back to Syria, to become Syrian Kurds. I think the United States have that influence on that.
So there is a chance to broker. I'm going to have to interrupt you because, Bassam, we have to take a very quick break. We'll be right back. Yes. You're watching the France 24 debate.